Thanks. Well, good morning, I think it is, everybody. Test. There it works. I just got back from New York City last night at midnight, and I went to bed at 1, and I woke up at 4 to drive out here. So, and that's been like pretty much the whole past 3 weeks. Like I think 3 weeks ago I flew from Philly to Boston, Seattle to Austin to San Francisco, and then San Francisco to Malta for a week, and then I went to Brussels, and then I got back here, and then I was at PNC at Pittsburgh yesterday or 2 days ago, and then New York, and then anyway. So I'm glad to be here. Unfortunately, I'm not going to stay very long. I'd love. This is one of my favorite times to come, but I haven't seen my family in like 3 weeks. So my wife at this point, you're getting the messages where she's like, "Hey, it was great to wake up and you weren't there again today." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Sorry." Technically, I'm home though. Just a little bit about myself, Dave. I started my career off in the security industry. Even before I joined the NSA and doing all the hacking stuff and everything. The big thing for me was I figured out how to code and taking apart things and trying to figure out how they worked. And joined the military, and they kind of homed in on those skill sets. And I spent 2 years in Iraq and a lot of other places. Then got out and became a chief security officer for a Fortune 1000 company for a number of years, and then started my own 2 companies. So I run Trusted Sec and Binary Defense, which are both located in Cleveland, Ohio, but we have folks all over the country. If you're a Python dev or a developer, F# or any pretty much objective programming or object-oriented programming language, we're always looking to hire people. Same thing for pen testers and all that other stuff. We're always out there looking. So just ping me at info@trustedsec.com or info@binarydefense.com or davek@trustedsec.com. We're always looking. Helped start DerbyCon and a number of other places. Also one of the world's sexiest men alive. I always like putting that one up there because that's not photoshopped in any way. I was on the Katie show, and if you haven't seen that before, it's on the Katie show, and Benedict Cumberbatch, the guy that plays Doctor Strange and all those other ones, was coming up next. And they said, up next, one of the world's sexiest men alive, and then they removed the up next for like a half a second, and then the whole internet went viral and copied that, so it was fun. But what we're here to talk about today, if you look at the security industry and where it's come to, it's matured and gone a lot of different directions than when I was in. You look at DEF CON and it's at Alexis Park and there's, 200 people there, at the conference, to what we see now with 25,000 people and, commercial products and, industries and people dedicated to security and recognizing that security is an issue. It's really weird because, we hit a certain period, probably a good 5 to 10 year period, where we're sitting there kind of crying wolf. We're like, hey, security is going to be a problem down the road. We should probably do something. Hey, security is probably going to be an issue down the road. We should probably do something. And then we finally got it, and we have no idea what to do at this point, right? We have all this money and this funding and these people to go and actively do it. And so we're in the search for the Holy Grail. If anybody's seen Monty Python, The Holy Grail, great movie. A lot of you look really young, so you might not even know what that is, which is really weird. But the whole purpose and premise was to find the Holy Grail and, have all this power and all this other stuff. And, we're trying to find the best ways to defend against a lot of what we see today, or go on the offense to emulate what we do as attackers. But in a lot of cases, that search is kind of hard because business works in a lot of different ways. The good news is I think Barracuda solved, data breaches, so we can all go home now. We don't even need the conference anymore. So I was going through an airport and I saw that and I just had to put that in there. Like, goodbye data breaches. The marketing is amazing. And I was actually going through New York City yesterday, JFK, and of course, Cylance was there, and it's like, hey, we use sophisticated artificial intelligence to stop the hackers, and you just have to giggle as you're walking past it, It's just like, it's ridiculous, the type of stuff, that's kind of coming out, in the marketing stuff nowadays. And so you see technology touted as artificial intelligence and machine learning, to stop the hackers. And what's interesting is, most of the time we go against a lot of this technology, and I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards about some of the stuff that we do, but it doesn't do much to stop what we do as attackers. The technology itself is usually pretty low bar when it comes to what we do as hackers every single day. And maybe it does well at the commoditized ransomware or, executables that we've been battling for 15, 20, 30 years. But it doesn't typically stop most of the stuff that we see today in the news. And we see a market driven by fear. Stop the hackers now. Don't suffer a data breach. All the negative marketing. And if you look at it, technology can help, but it can't solve most if not all the issues that we really face today. I mean, it could be nice pointed solutions and things that we see, but if you look at outages that we have currently today, I mean, we have toasters and ovens and things like that causing outages of our infrastructure. We can't even secure those, let alone our corporate infrastructure that we see out there today. I mean, with Myria and everything else that happened out there, last week with Toaster, or 3 weeks ago, with toasters and things like that. I mean, it's amazing how easy it is to knock out services or go after specific systems. And if you look at ransomware and compromises and phishing, it's all a symptoms of bad security practices. A good example is, ransomware is the same technique that we used 10 years ago or 15 years ago on AOL. Like, hey, download this executable and it's going to give you this or whatever. And they download the executable, they double click it, and all of a sudden now you have, sub 7, deployed to their machine. Hypothetically, people did that, right? In the AOL days. And, all the, things that we could do then, PE files and executables have been known for a long time. And that's why we started to move towards application whitelisting, more of a trusted computing type of way of saying, okay, we're only going to allow signed binaries in our environments. Does that ever work? Has anybody ever been able to get to just signed binaries in their environment? No, right? It's not possible. So our vendors, our people, our installs, different business processes, our own internal developers, there's no chance of us ever getting to that, unfortunately. It would be awesome. So like, hey, we know that we have this vendor. This vendor has to give us a code signing certificate, or get us their signature before we ever do work with them as a vendor, and then import that into our tool. Now we have a model that we support or trust that customer. That doesn't happen the way that it should, in most organization environments. And so most of these are just symptoms of bad security practices. A good example of phishing. Phishing still leverages, if you look at most of the compromises, they still, drop binaries onto the systems. Granted, it's moving to PowerShell and other methods and things like that. But binaries still to this day are the main infection method for most of everything that we do. I love this cartoon. Hopefully everybody's already seen this or whatever. But, here on the left-hand side, we have, all the data security and all the programs that we've built around firewalls and intrusion prevention systems and all this other stuff that's trying to protect us. And then in the right corner, we have Dave, the human error element of the whole aspect of it, right? The person that clicks a button or clicks a link or opens up an Excel document and says, hey, you can't read this until you enable macros, and you enable macros and it compromises the machine. And then the whole company has a situation on their hands. And that's really where we're at today, right? If you look across the entire landscape of security, it all comes down to the person. Hacking websites and things like that is still definitely doable. We just did one yesterday, actually. We had a full compromise from one of our customers' main corporate websites. Still happens today. But it's much less likely of those happening because it's much more challenging for hackers. Hackers need to understand web applications and go after them and have to have a high knowledge. Or I can just buy an EK, an exploit kit on the market for $200 or use SAT or something like that and get access to the customer, a much easier way and have access to the infrastructure. And so if you look at it, basic concepts, and if we implement basic concepts, they work. But the problem is it takes a lot of work to implement basic concepts. You're talking about changing behavior and patterns of behavior. You're talking about, understanding a business and making sure you can impact and put controls in place to stop those from actually happening. But what we do as hackers isn't magic. I mean, it's the same thing over and over and over again. It's the same variation of everything that we do. I mean, every single person, whether, you look at how you fish versus how I fish versus somebody else that fishes, or who fishes, over in Eastern Europe, or who fishes in Russia and China. It's all the same techniques. Just different pretexts and ways of going after things. And maybe a different command and control infrastructure. It's almost hypnotizing, isn't it? It is. Just watch this the rest of the thing. I'll just talk and leave this off the rest of the time here. But if you look at kind of the evolution of what we do as attacking, the first, stages of an attack is, first finding your target. Am I going to go after somebody on LinkedIn? Let's just say it's, we love putting information on LinkedIn, right? Our technologies that we use, the corporation that we work with, and technologies they use because we're experts in that area. So if you have ArcSight or, Logarithm or, Alien Vault, and I know when your SIM was implemented, I know whether or not it's mature. If you have Symantec, because you put all that information readily available. So I do a little bit of reconnaissance. I find out who that person is that I want to target, and then I go after them. Those phases are very hard to detect, especially if I'm setting up my infrastructure, I'm looking at who I'm going to go after, I'm going through websites. You're not really going to see much of that because I'm not attacking anything at this point. But at this point, what we do after this is, we put firewalls in place, DMZs, network architecture. Segmentation still to this day is really terrible because we build our networks very flat. So that's a difficult one. Some companies are going through network segmentation or have that, which is great. But then we build all of our eggs in our basket. We put endpoint protection in place, right? And that literally is our last line of defense for what we deal with today. And so if you have, let's just say, Symantec or McAfee or those, well, if I write something and it gets around Symantec or McAfee, where's your detection controls after that? And so what ends up happening, is you have a SIM, right? And that SIM is supposed to be the detection that happens after that. But then people realize, like, wow, SIMs are like millions and millions of dollars, and it requires like, a whole bunch of people to staff it, and like years and years and years of maturity and building use cases. And like, hey, if a database is doing this, that's not normal, and I need to understand the database or the web application in order for me to understand if an attack's actually happening. Or there's different things that you look at. So a SIM's a lot of work, and if you don't have a very mature SIM infrastructure, you're probably not going to see most of the things like lateral movement or moving to different systems. And so if I attack and I get through the initial intrusion, I bypass your endpoint, security pieces of it, and I establish a command and control infrastructure, the first thing I typically do is try to elevate my permissions to administrator or move to different systems on the network, what we call lateral movement. So going from one system to the next system, to the next system, to the next system, until I get access to a database that has all the data that I want. Then I exfiltrate the data back, and then boom, I'm all set, right? And if you look at some of the statistics, usually it takes a couple of days for a hacker, once they've compromised their initial endpoint, to get access to the data that they need. So you have a couple of days of detection. So if you don't detect it in this stage here, you're pretty much screwed when it comes to the rest of it, because you have a very small window of actively going after the different things. Now I'm going to show you a video, and some of you may have already seen this. Oh, I'm not supposed to play that yet. So you may have seen this, but it's a good example of going after a help desk. This is one I did on CNN, and it's about a year old or so. I got permission from a customer to hack into a organization live on TV, as long as the names weren't revealed. And I took advantage of social engineering a help desk. And help desk, we traditionally try to reset people's passwords, right? That's kind of like the standard MO that we do as pen testers. We just like, hey, can you reset this password? Well, I need to know your, last four of your social or something like that or whatever. What was interesting with this one is I took advantage, instead of trying to reset a password that could be misconstrued as weird or odd, or maybe I don't know the data that they're going to be requesting, I just took advantage of what the function of a help desk is, to help. So I'm like, hey, I can't get to a website. Can you help me out with the website? Well, sure, let me try to go to the website. Okay, I just compromised your machine, right? That's it. So, why isn't that? It was playing for a second there. See, that is playing over there.
Oh, yeah, I guess next time I doesn't do it. Sorry, I didn't think of this. Yeah. So you're playing VGA with Lexi.
David Kennedy was one of them.
Let me see if I can.
Known as a social engineer or a people hacker. His craft is to dupe you into doing things and sharing information.
Can you guys hear it at least?
Probably should.
Boys to my plate would be that. That'd be it.
In David's case,
Ah, look at that.
He and his team shows how it's done. Step 1, spoof his number so it looks like he's calling from inside the company, and then call tech support.
Hello, you there?
Hello.
Hi, this is Ken from Miami.
I was wondering if you could take a look at a website I'm trying to get to. It's for a big customer thing I'm working on for Monday, and I can't seem to get to the website from my computer.
Sure, what's the website? I'll see if I can get to it.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate the help. I mean, it could be a stupid thing. I'm really stuck with computers, but so it's www.survey. That's survey-pro.com.
Yeah, I got a prompt to open. Just put open, and I'm at the site now.
Here's what the IT guy doesn't realize. By clicking that link, he's just given David full access to his computer.
Whoa, okay, that's weird. I just hit it and it works. It seems like it's working fine now. Awesome. I don't know what you did, man, but I really appreciate the help.
Hey, no problem. That was easy.
That was it?
We're on this computer right now.
We were able to take over this guy's computer within, I would say, like, under 2 minutes.
Under 2 minutes, yeah. Under 2 minutes, took over his entire computer, and think of it as not just his computer, but it's pretty much a downfall of the entire company. So in that case, I got through the initial intrusion part, I established command and control. Now from there, I'm on this, help desk person's computer, and then what do they typically have access to? Everything, right? Or other people's computers, so I can lateral movement into admins that have, domain admin rights, maybe have a Kerberos token that's actively available that can impersonate and move to other systems. At this point in time, I have, a wide array of access to the rest of the infrastructure. And the good news is 9 times out of 10, they're what? At least local admins, right? This I can guarantee that they're local admins in most cases. Help desks are almost always local admins. That's great for me as an attacker because now I can extract hashes and grab information in memory, move to different systems, right? And then from there I move to, still to this day we have local admin accounts that are the same on every single box. Like that is the easiest way for me to move to different systems is lateral movement is based on local admins being the same on every single box, on servers and workstations. So you have all these areas here that, just by calling up a help desk and doing something, you have the ability to do. Now, the thing is, I didn't have to even do that. That was cool because it was on CNN. But I literally could just send an email to the help desk and say, hey, I can't get to this site. Can you open it up for me? And what are they going to do? Right? Now, the attack vector that I used in this specific one was an HTA attack vector. It's built in the set. And HTAs are basically extension types that you can use that are built into Windows. It doesn't take advantage of an exploit. But when you go to the site and it has an HTA embedded into it, it just says, hey, do you want to open this site? And it says it's signed by Microsoft. Okay, you hit open and it compromises your machine. And it's all on disk, all in memory, by the way. So it doesn't actually write to disk or anything like that. It does PowerShell injection. So it loads Meterpreter directly into memory and then shoots it out. So it's a really easy way of getting around kind of like everything that you want to. So anything that is somewhat believable in any way, shape, or form, like anything that we want to do. I mean, you could like literally do anything you want to, as long as it's somewhat believable, it will work. Good example, I did a phish, and it was, I love this one because it works every time, especially around the same times as the new iPhones. You just say, hey, we're happy that our company's 72 years old, or whatever, or 2 years old, or 7 years old, or 15 years old, however old the company is, right? And you say, we're so proud of our company being 15 years old, we're giving away 15 free iPhones to the first 15 people that register. You get more people clicking on that than you can ever possibly imagine. Like, I need like load balancers on my web servers to handle the amount of people trying to click and get those first 15, free iPhones. And so if it's just somewhat believable, people just click and you get shells. Just the other day, we were doing a very, very large manufacturer, extremely large manufacturer. And Larry did a phish, and it was the iPhone giveaway. He had over 1,000 shells. He hit the record. I've only gotten like 400 or something like that. It's like my max or something like that. Except on DEF CON. DEF CON I did like 2,000 shells on stage. But like he got 1,000 shells just from something stupid like that. But health benefits, whatever you can possibly make up, you have the ability to use and use it effectively. Same thing too. If you just want to, pretend to be a security guard. I can turn this down. I don't need this sound. This is us outside of a building, and this is one of our guys, Paul Berkland, and Paul is just pretending to be a security guard, dressed up as a security guard, and says, hey, our security system isn't working. Can I see your badge? She actually takes the badge off, gives it to him. We have a prox mark sitting there. We clone her badge. And then we just walk into the building. It's all good. And then we're in. Great. Or you can just dress up in a suit with balloons. And then walk in behind and just walk into the building for you. Whatever. Now we're in the building. Whatever you want to do. This one's one of my favorites. Hopefully some of you have seen this. This is actually at DerbyCon. And Hyatt gave us permission to do this. And so there's a sensor on the top here that detects motion. And I have an e-cigarette. Don't smoke, but I always carry one with me. And you can literally just blow smoke through the cracks, and it triggers a motion sensor to open the door on the other side. There you go. Or you can just be deviant. Just walk down the street with a thing of whiskey. And there's a sensor up there inside the bank. It's always the easy stuff, right? That we're designing from. And it's funny because we're trying to build all of our capabilities to stop sophisticated attackers coming from Russia and China, all these other locations, when we have basic passwords still sitting out there. We have local admins that are shared across the board. We have bad security permissions all over the place. We're not even at a level to be able to start to look at that stuff, let alone try to raise the bar to stop a lot of the sophisticated attacks that you see out there. Humans continue to be the biggest dilemma that we face today in security and tech and just in general. I mean, because you have one person that literally can be the entire downfall of your entire organization. So you can do all the education awareness you want to, all the phishing that you want to. I love companies that use, like phishing tools. Phishing, by the way, I'm not saying education isn't key. In fact, I hit on that quite a bit. Education is paramount. But that shouldn't be the only piece of your security program. Just because your click ratio is down to 30% means absolutely nothing. It means that there's still 30% of people that will still click a link that still compromise your organization. So you have to have your security program designed around controls that can effectively stop or detect when those types of things happen in your environment. So those are things that you need to just, be conscious of, is that, listen, if someone clicks, what do we do at that point in time? And I'll talk a little about that. And it's interesting because not everybody's a nerd. We try to design our security programs off of people being technology savvy. A good example is my grandma, right? My grandma knows nothing about technology, like literally nothing about technology. And I'm kind of like the kingpin in our family for technology, right? Like if you have a security problem or computer problem, you come to me, right? That's how it works in our family, right? So, new computer, I gotta tell them the new computers to get, right? What antivirus they get? None, right? So you tell them all the different things that happen. And so my grandma calls me up about 2 weeks ago and she's like, "Hey, David, you'd be so proud of me." I'm like, "Oh, cool. What happened, Grandma?" She's like, "Well, I got this call from Microsoft and, they're like, hey, my antivirus expired and I renewed it. I paid it. I gave them my credit card information. Everything's all set." I'm like, "Grandma, you got a Mac. You don't even have Windows." She's like, "Well, I thought I had Windows somewhere." I'm like, "Well, okay." So our security programs are not designed to handle people like that, right? Because people aren't technology savvy in a lot of cases, and we try to make it that way. So we'll talk a little about that. For me, fixing humans requires three things. You have to have the education to try to teach them basic concepts, right? You try to teach people. It's the same thing like HR. When you get to a company, do you know the basic principles of your company? Like, hey, you can't walk around the office naked, right? Trusted Tech, you might be able to get away with it, but you'd get a warning about that one. You can't do certain things, right? There's things that you can't do as part of normal business and normal operations, as part of the company. Hey, salary, payroll, things you need to contact if you have issues with your, electronic wire or things like that. We have basic concepts. Same thing goes for security. Understanding principles that you have to employees are things that you shouldn't do. Like, hey, if you get an email out, that says EXT at the end of it, you need to inspect it to make sure it's actually going to the right place. Just basic concepts. So you have the education piece. Then you go to the basics piece, which is the foundation of your security program. Putting things in place that are the basics that prohibit attackers from either moving laterally in your environment or put things in place that make it much more difficult for attackers to move in your environment. That's the basics as part as that goes. And the last part is the actual technology, the prevention pieces of it, the things that you can do technology-wise to stop it, and I'll hit on these. So those are the three concepts, right? Education, reaching the users, basics, proven things that stop or hinder attackers, and then the technology, which is the last part of it, and usually the thing that comes last in your security program. In most cases, you don't need, a new firewall. And I always love using this analogy. Like, you just bought this great next-gen firewall, right? And you have people in your environment that, let's just say you have 5 network engineers. And those 5 network engineers are like those old grumpy guys with the beards and the cane and everything, that you have to go through hell and high water just to get a firewall rule put into, right? And they're Cisco brilliant geniuses. They're in their own crazy world of their own networking, ninjas and BGP and all this other stuff, right? And then you're like, okay, well, we're going to go Palo Altos. And so you take the Cisco stuff here that they're awesome at, and like, well, we're going to go Palo Altos and train you on a whole new piece of complexity and technology that you probably already have plenty of time to deal with anyway, right? And then we're going to import all of the 10 years of crap that we've done over here into the Palo Altos, and now all of a sudden we're next gen. It doesn't work that way. Like, you need to redo your entire network architecture and infrastructure if you want to actually do something about that, right? That's a good example of the technology causing a hindrance when you have the basics in place. I mean, just going through your firewall rules and removing all the other stuff that you did and starting to do network segmentation and those types of things, and then you might be at a good stance to move over to something like next gen. So let's talk a little about the education. Our current metrics for clicking, and I kind of hit this a little bit, it's a start. Getting people to understand, like, hey, phishing does happen, and going through different pretexts and attack scenarios. But in a lot of cases, that's not going to be your foolproof way out of there. Education means training users on technology, both in their professional and personal life. A good example is when I was in charge of the security program at Diebold, we had the most effectiveness on adopting not just, not people clicking on things or reporting things, but also like new security initiatives, like if we're putting in 2-factor authentication across the company. We had more adoption because we were educating people on how to protect themselves at home as well. Like, hey, you should do 2-factor authentication on your Facebook and Twitter accounts and make sure your kids have the same thing too. And here's things that you can do at your home wireless. And they appreciated that. And then we're like, oh, hey, well, we're going to implement 2-factor authentication here to protect, the company data. They understood that, and it wasn't like the pitchforks and fire of you're hindering me from doing my job every single day that you typically get from users when you implement something that may be different than they're used to. And so if you can relate to them, personally, it's much easier to relate things back to them in the professional side as well. And I think there's been some statistics like I think the Pwnymon Institute, a couple other ones. Like, basically, the long story of it, I don't know the exact stat, but it's like people don't really care about company data. You ask them about like their social security number, they get super defensive and personal, right? They could care less about, uploading a confidential data or entering a username and password, and that's company related. But if you can change that perspective and relate it back to them at their health, like when the OPM breach happened, or like Adult Friend Finder just happened a couple weeks ago, those types of things, are things that you can relate back to them. Now, you probably don't want to be sending emails to your corporate saying, hey, your email address was on Adult Friend Finder, and you should probably, whatever. That's your personal business, right? But other breach sites, like when LinkedIn happened, I'd probably send them, notification saying, hey, LinkedIn got breached. Here, your personal information is exposed, that type of stuff, and change your password. The basics for me are probably the most fundamental thing, because as a attacker, someone that goes on the offense all the time, it's not, I can't even remember the last time I've actually had to run an exploit against an organization or a company. Because the basics are always what gets me in. Weird passwords, multicast, same passwords on one machine as the other. Those things are the same type of things over and over again that we see in every single organization and environment. If you just applied some of these basic concepts, it would literally make it much more difficult for me. I think there was someone did a survey on Twitter, and the thing was, is vulnerability, patching vulnerability is the most important thing in your security program? The answer is no, it's not. You're going to have vulnerabilities all over the place. Now, you should probably try to patch as much stuff as you possibly can, but you can make it much more difficult for hackers to get in. Here's some concepts here. I'll talk a little about that group policy here in a second. LAPS or ships. LAPS, if you're not familiar with LAPS, it's you can implement it in with Microsoft. It's free, and what it does is it randomizes all of your local admin passwords and stores them in Active Directory. So help desk can you can have group policy groups assigned to help desk people, and then they can go and grab that password, authenticate those systems, and all that other stuff. But it keeps it for me when I compromise one machine, I can't move to the second machine or the third machine or the fourth machine because every single password is completely different. Privileged account management, Device Guard. If you're not familiar with Device Guard, came out, I believe, in Windows 10. It's actually a pretty neat thing, more like an application whitelisting approach, or basically baselining your infrastructure. It's really great. I'll talk about suspicious processes with network connections. That's a good one. And obviously the basics around network segmentation. Should Mary in sales be able to have full ports and protocols to somebody in IT? No. Should, Mary in sales ever need to access, RDP? No, right? So restricting ports and protocols to infrastructure and environment and making it much more difficult for me. A good example is a lot of companies, when they do network segmentation, you can block off subnets based off of specific areas and just say, okay, well, if they're contractors, maybe they only need 80 and 443 to our data center infrastructure. Just minimizing the access that people have into your server environments makes it much more easier to handle. These are fun to deploy, honey tokens. There's 2 locations I recommend. So Ben 10, one of the guys that works at TrustedSec, is an awesome dude. He wrote a tool for trying to find local link multicast resolution local link multicast name resolution protocol, or NBNS, NetBIOS name services. There's an attack you can do in an environment that is very, very common for us to do as attackers or pen testers or whatever. There's a tool out there called Responder or Envy, and what they do is they wait for a machine to say, hey, I'm looking for file server 1 using multicast. What'll happen is your computer, when you log in, it'll try to do automatic login scripts like map drives, or go to your domain controller and map a drive to be able to pull group policy and those types of things. And what you can do is your computer will actually broadcast out and say, hey, where's file share 1? And the attacker's like, I'm file share 1, come on over. And then it passes the netNTM v2 hashes directly to you. It's like raining magic credentials in the environment just by having this tool running. But what's interesting is you can actually detect this with Ben's tool. So event log 4648. What happens is Ben just creates a randomized username and password. Let's just say a 20-character username and a 20-character password. Obviously a not valid account, right? It's a completely made-up facade account with a completely fake username and password. Well, with event log 4648, what that is explicit login credentials were used to log into the remote system. Should you ever have those username and passwords ever logging into a system ever in the first place? No. So you can find those in your environment just by deploying that specific tool across your network, looking for those types of things. You can also put fake ones out there too. A fake domain admin username and password. This one I stumbled across just by going through different API calls. You can see here, this one's one of my favorites. It's create process with login W. What you can do is everybody familiar with Mimikatz, right? So what you can do is you can compromise a machine, and there's an undocumented feature within LSASS where it stores clear text passwords in memory in WDigest. So basically, when you log in with your username and password, that password's actually cached and stored directly in memory. So if you have a 50-character password, you can extract that 50-character password. With Windows 8.1 and above, that was fixed with a patch. There's also a patch you can apply to Windows 7. But to re-enable, it's just a registry entry. So you can just hit regadd and then add that registry entry, and then boom, next time they log in, you have the ability to view, cache credentials. Good, by the way, good one to actually monitor. What's going on, man? What are you doing? What are you doing? Sticker? I thought he was gonna ice me too. I got I Love Cybers by Bill there. I thought I was getting ice for sure. That would have sucked. But with this create login process W, what you can do is what I recommend. You can use this tool by Fuzzy Security. So if you go here, it has it there. And it's a PowerShell script. And you can run it as a scheduled task across your environment. And what I recommend is creating a domain admin account on your domain controllers and give it like a 50-character crazy password and lock it in a safe and never deal with it again, right? And then what you can do is use that tool and create a scheduled task across your environment through group policy, and then have that domain admin account and a fake password in there, and it actually shoots it into memory. So if you ever get a compromised machine, they'll go to use Mimikatz, they'll see that domain admin's in memory, try to extract it. And if you ever see a failed login attempt on that account, you know sure as hell someone's in your environment. So a good way of snagging, attackers in your environment just by using something very lightweight and simple across your network. I mean, I would go after a domain admin account if I were specifically there. Another one, pass the hash detection. I figured out a way of identifying pass the hash. There's a lot of great articles out there, but nothing that was reliable. And what I realized is that you can actually detect pass the hash very reliably directly through. And I actually missed one thing here, but I'll talk about that. But directly through an event log. So what you look for is event log 4624, successful login type. Login type is 3, network login. You're looking for the NTLM SSP account, authenticating, okay? So that's the one I forgot to put up there, the NTLM SSP account. And you're looking for key length 0. What that means is that it's a pretty non-traditional protocol that's establishing a communication to a remote server to authenticate. RDP, normal communications like RPC and NetBIOS and things like that will still use, 128-bit session key value coming from a normal Microsoft machine. But when using a hacker tool or doing something like pass the hash, the key link's actually 0. So you can pass all these together and actually detect pass the hash in your environment. It's very reliable from what we can actually detect. So it's a pretty good one. Suspicious processes. Why would these ever have network connections? A good one to add to this, by the way, is notepad.exe. Why would that? Or calc.exe. I mean, seriously. But some of these are really good. Like my favorite one's regsvr32. regsvr32, I think Subt found that one originally. And what it is it's a Windows executable binary. And it actually has a built-in proxy-aware browser into the executable. It's perfect for us as hackers. So we just call that executable, have it go to our website, download an SCT file, which, by the way, you don't have to have a .sct extension for you to actually download and execute, and directly execute a DLL in memory. So you don't have to touch disk. You get around application whitelisting. It's used quite a bit. Same thing for like run DLL32. You can import DLL directly into memory. MS Build, you can have MS Build call a remote XML and have it automatically execute code as well. So that should never have network connections. CBD debuggers, tracker.exe is a new one. I think that Subt just found as well. That looks more so, you can do like reflective DLL injection through a Microsoft binary. So there's a lot of those that you should be looking at in your environment to say, why did those ever have network connections in the first place? They never should be in your environment with network connections. Or maybe you have a printer. Like I will see sometimes like printers will use like run DLL32 to import a, like a DLR or whatnot. But should they ever be contacting the internet? Like non-RFC 1918 IP addresses? No, right? Those are things that are sure signs of indication of compromise in your environment. Some persistence hooks, monitoring registry keys. Like for example, if I'm going to enable WDigest in memory, those are things that you should definitely look for. Here's one that's one of my favorites. You can use. Does everybody remember the sticky keys issue a while ago? So you can basically reboot a machine, boot it into Linux, and then rename sethc.exe to command.exe, and then you can hit the shift key 5 times and it pops up a system level prompt, when you reboot it. Well, the good news is you actually don't even need to reboot the machine. You can just change this registry key here, and then next time you want to do sticky keys, you can place it with any malware you want to, or whatever you want to. And next time you hit sticky keys, it works. You don't even have to reboot the machine at all. So it just puts the Windows protected process in debug mode and calls a second binary in order to do it. So things that you should probably look for in your environment that are easy ways of doing persistence. The best GPO ever, this one right here, deny access to this computer from the network, and it's located here. And what you would do is put your local admins in this group. And the reason for that is, let's just say you have let's just say you have really bad rights management in your environment. Mary in sales is an admin. All these other people are admins, right? What this will prohibit you to do is, let's just say I compromise Mary's account, and I escalate myself to administrative level rights or system level rights because she's an admin, and then I extract the local hash values off of that machine. Can I now authenticate to remote systems with this GPO enabled? No. So I can't access network resources with a local admin account because the local administrators group is not in there. This doesn't impact domain users, by the way. So you're okay with domain users and everything else. When it comes to local admins, you can't actually authenticate to other systems. You can't hit the admin share. You can't hit the C share. And why that's important is it minimizes my footprint of attack on those systems, and I have to go now try to bridge the server environments. I can't just lateral movement to other systems. Or maybe I can if you have other, maybe Kerberos tokens or things that are actively available, or service accounts that are allowed to do that. But this will literally shut me down for the local admin attacks. And so that means you don't even have to randomize your local admin passwords. It doesn't matter at that point in time. It's something that makes it much more difficult for me as an attacker. Does anybody have this implemented, by the way? See? Basics, man. Basics is what it really takes on all of this. That right there would stop a lot of this. So the technology. If you look at technology, we create technology. Sorry about that. We create technology faster than I've ever experienced or seen. We have new versions of iPhones, new versions of Android, and now we have agile development. Everybody familiar with all that, right? And now we have DevOps right on top of that. So now we have DevOps where we have to have one seamless, coherent wing of our organization that can literally push code into prod as fast as possible. That's our whole design, right? Everything from the developers to automation testing to the architecture folks that push it out to the environment to QA, beta, prod, whatever. It's supposed to move very, very, very fast in a one-arm motion to be able to promote code super quick. And so there's no way that we can get our hands around that in security, right? And if you look at that, in order to accommodate agile movement and getting code out there faster, we started creating bug bounty programs and ways of trying to, get more people reviewing or looking at our code, or maybe doing, testing every once in a while. What's interesting is if you see, Apple will pay $200,000 for iOS and iCloud bugs, right? Facebook paid $15,000 to close a bug that can unlock any user's account. The Microsoft bug bounty program, anything from $300,000 down to $10,000 or $5,000. So we got bug bounty programs to help augment the rapid release of code and everything else. Does anybody know how much they go for in the black market or to governments? So let me just ask a question. If I'm a security researcher, or I'm a hacker, or I do work with a different government, whether it's the United States, China, or Russia, and Apple offers me $200,000, and on the black market it's going for $1.5 million, what am I going to pick? You can say something.
For some reason, some of the silly people do the 200,000 that Apple.
Some silly people do the 200,000. Well, I'll talk about that. Those are some good folks, actually. I agree with those folks. But Microsoft's zero-day exploit hits the market for $90,000 price tag, and this exploit wouldn't have been under the criteria for what they reward people for bug bounties, because it wasn't circumventing a technique, even though it was a zero-day. So, do I make $90,000 or no money and disclose to Microsoft? Do I make $1.5 million or $200,000 to Apple for all my hard-earned research? And that's where we've seen the market really shift to, is that bug bounties cannot accommodate what is the going rate for market value of different things out there. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of different variations of bug bounties, right? You have bug bounties that you can launch on your main corporate website or your external infrastructure, and there's rules of engagement and all this other stuff. When it comes to product technology and releasing it out there, I could make a lot more money working on the underground market than I ever could, working for an actual bug bounty program. Chris Nickerson had a good comment. A bug bounty is like going to the bar, walking in, leaving a buck knife on the table, and saying, first person who performs a successful open heart surgery on me gets $50. And the analogy behind that is your results are going to vary based on the people that are testing you in bug bounty programs, right? So when you have a bug bounty program, has anybody ever had a bug bounty program, by the way? No? Okay, well, I guess I'm not talking to a bunch of bug bounty people. But bug bounties are interesting because what will happen is you will get like 60,000 submissions for the same thing of someone, some folks in different countries running kinetics or scanners against you and reporting a false positive, and you're going to get those over and over and over again. And out of those 60,000, you might have one that could be a heart surgeon that actually finds a decent bug for you. And so just knowing that is fine, but you're going to have, 60,000 things that you're going to have to deal with. Like the first time United, I think United.com released their bug bounty program, it took them like 6 months to actually respond back to them because they had an overwhelming amount of submissions. And they said like 99 or 98% of them were just invalid submissions. So you need a whole staff to handle all of that. You need people to handle that bug bounty program. You need to actually look and try to figure out what those are in order for them to happen. And you might find a heart surgeon. But to be honest with you, is there a good chance that if you're in a bar, that if you're a really good heart surgeon, that you're going to spend the time to perform open heart surgery at a bar with your reputation and everything else for $50? No, right? I'm going to be a pen tester working for a company or working internally with an organization or doing other things like research than going and getting $50 for doing with a buck knife on a table. So good analogy there. I thought was pretty awesome. Most of the actual hacks that we saw wouldn't actually constitute a bug bounty program. Good example, bypassing two-factor authentication. The guys over at Bo's a ninja, by the way. He's amazing. But bypassing two-factor authentication. Everybody see that one? So if you have two-factor authentication on OWA, either through like phone factor, multi-factor, through Duo, all those other ones, you know that you can completely circumvent that 100%, right? There's no, it just doesn't work at all because they have, you have EWS and all that other stuff that you can just go around. And what do these things do? Do you have do your mobile phones require you to do two-factor authentication when you hook it up with ActiveSync? No, right? By the way, do you know that you can compromise someone's direct machine through this as well? Through OWA rules? Are you familiar with OWA rules? So there's a great tool out there called Ruler. Yeah, it's in the Pentesters framework. If you haven't seen the Pentesters framework, it's an exploitation framework that I wrote. A tool framework that I wrote. That's like basically like, you get Ubuntu and you go and you run PTF and then it installs all your tools for you and it keeps them all up to date. But that's how you keep kind of relevant with all the tools that are happening out there. But Ruler is one where you can use it against this as well. If they have two-factor authentication open or if they don't, what you do is you can create OWA rules and you tell the OWA rules to say, hey, I need you to go and download and execute this file. And then next time that person logs in and opens up Outlook, it compromises their machine and you get a shell. So you can actually do direct compromises through OWA anytime you want to, if you ever have access to OWA, or if you want to. Ruler was just updated to handle this attack as well, so you can do it just through that as well. So there's a lot of great attacks that you can do through there, but that wouldn't constitute a bug bounty program because it's not circumventing any of their technologies like ASLR or DEP or Device Guard or anything else out there. So that's no bug bounty; it's just out there. Same thing for Android phones rooted by the most, serious Linux escalation bug. Google disclosed an unpatched Windows 0-day vulnerability to Microsoft. By the way, they were really pissed about that one. They were really pissed. Google identified major vulnerability in Apple's OS and iOS cores. So, these don't typically constitute and rate what, they would consider a bug bounty program. And so in speaking of that, there's a split in this industry. This is what Joey is about to talk about here. Folks that would take $1.5 million, but those that for some reason still do $200,000, which is a lot of money still, right? Or, do responsible disclosure, or do security research and work with the company in actively fixing it before even submitting it to the bug bounty programs or even doing bug bounty programs. So there's a divide. There's ones that are hell-bent on making money, which is nothing wrong with that. And you have the other folks that are trying to do the betterment of the security industry. If you look at what's happening today, the InfoSec industry is at fault for where we're at. Everything from the exploits and the bug bounty programs that we have to the underground stuff that we're doing, all the way to driving cars off of roads and scaring everybody to where there's almost congressional actions almost each time. Hey, do you know what happens when you drive a car off the road on TV? People freak out, right? Do you know that Congress has a second grade understanding of technology? What do you think that they do when they see somebody getting... Second grade's a little high. That's true. I remember, so I testified in front of Congress twice, and I remember sitting there, and I'm trying to explain why it's important to do security on government websites. And it was a Democrat from Texas. I didn't know that existed, but apparently it's something that, whatever. Democrat from Texas was like, well, David, I appreciate you coming in and talking to us about it, but websites get breached all the time, so why would we even build security in because we know we're just going to get breached? I'm like, can I just quit? Can I leave? This is where we're at today, right? But what happens when you drive somebody off the side of a road in a car on TV? Congress is like, whoa, that hacker's bad, and we need to stop people from running people off the side of the roads. So we need to put laws in place that jail or bar people from doing, these types of things in the future, i.e. security researchers. So we are in our own fault for what's happening today. And I guarantee you, with planes flying sideways and all this other stuff, right? We have a lot of responsibility in this industry right now where we need to work on responsible disclosure of people versus trying to get the media hype to scare everybody. People are scared already. We don't need to scare them anymore. They know that we can take down, the energy grid. We know we can collapse the financial systems. They know that now. We don't need to sit there and pull people off the sides of the roads and show that it's actually doable. Or else we're going to have laws that prohibit us from doing it. Just what's going to happen with Congress and the House and Senate. And there's a whole, now everybody can get anything passed nowadays. So, literally you can take one of those events. So it's screaming, yelling, and scaring all in the effort of trying to get, our word out there, our message. We don't need that anymore. So we look at the security researchers, and many of you in the audience today, that's where, to me, the future is for this industry. The folks that are actively working with companies to fix things. Folks that aren't necessarily driven by money, or maybe they are. Money's not a bad thing to be driven by. Everyone wants to have a successful career and all those other things in this industry. But working with people on ethics and actually working with folks to fix things. Individuals like Matthew Graber. He's one of my favorites. I think I actually made t-shirts with Matthew Graber's face on it because I'm a huge fanboy of Matthew Graber. But if you don't know him, Manifestation on Twitter, he's one of the best PowerShell researchers and just an all-around security researcher and good guy that you ever meet. But he works for the side of good. He publishes his techniques, works with folks to get it actively fixed. And guess what? He focuses a heck of a lot on defense, on making things a lot better versus just actively going and breaking things. And it's great because I remember I was at DEF CON, and I remember I was at DEF CON maybe 12 or 14 or something like that. And I gave a presentation called PowerShell OMFG. It was the very first ever security PowerShell talk ever. The PowerShell was released. It was in beta form or whatnot. And it was the very first ever security talk ever given on PowerShell, which is really cool to say that you're the person that gave the first security PowerShell talk ever. But I remember talking with Microsoft. I'm like, yeah, I broke this, and I did this, and I can do this, and I got shells, and I can dump the SAM database, and I gave them all my code, and I'm like, yeah, I just broke in all your stuff. And I didn't realize why Jeff Snover, who wrote PowerShell, was pissed at me. So I just broke all the stuff, right? He's like, well, what are you doing? And I didn't understand that, hey, if I'm going to break all this stuff, I should probably work on trying to fix it too. What are the things that I can do to make it better when I'm actively going and doing this type of stuff, or releasing an exploit, or releasing tools or techniques of doing certain things? And Matthew's one of those folks. Good example too, Jared DeMott. He worked at Blue Hat. He released the bypass techniques for Emmet and worked with Microsoft on hopefully getting them fixed. Ben 10. If you can ask that guy anything you want to, you can call him up at 2 o'clock in the morning. You can trust me, call Ben at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's funny. But he'll help you out with whatever he can. His past his bedtime, actually. He's such a little guy. You like him. John Strand, who actively works on active defense and everything else when he does with SANS. You got Sean Metcalf, who probably has the most comprehensive way of securing Active Directory. If you don't know adsecurity.org, you should go to it, adsecurity.org. It's one of the best references you'll ever find on Active Directory security and understanding Kerberos and securing Kerberos and securing your infrastructure. He literally puts together these 60-page awesome, hasn't been published before, analysis on how to best stop attacks in certain environments. Jeff, who actually wrote PowerShell himself and contributed to the community and even open sourced it. Couldn't believe they open source PowerShell, right? It's amazing what is actually happening out there. We're familiar with Lee Holmes, probably one of the best, defensive people in Microsoft when it comes to PowerShell. Some of those good folks. My dad sits there and teaches kids on security at his local high school and protects the network. He's got a really interesting job because his whole purpose in life isn't to keep outside hackers out. It's to keep all the kids that are hacking him, safe. Because he got kids that are literally just trying to pop him every day. Cyber Bill?
Drink.
Huh? Who's got a drink right now? Cyber Bill, who is teaching our next generation. And all these other folks that are in this industry making a difference and doing things the right way. That's where this industry is headed. And that's where we need to keep heading, is actually doing things in a way... doing things in a way that works on making this industry better. And that's ultimately what we do. And obviously, if you didn't see your name on there, hopefully it will be soon. And you. I always like this quote, do something today that your future self will thank you for. And that's always what I try to look at when I'm doing things in the environment. Like people are like, well, what do you do to give back to the community? On Wednesday morning, at 7:30 a.m., I was presenting at a local high school on how to get into InfoSec and things that you can do to bring your career out. And I speak to the kids on everything. I show them breaking into buildings. Their teachers freak out and everything. It's awesome. And I do that once a month because I believe in the kids. I'm on 4 advisory boards for high schools. I'm on 6 advisory boards for colleges and helping them develop their curriculum for schools. So, what are you doing to contribute back to making either the next generation or what we're currently doing as far as research better? My last quote, and what I'll leave us on, is focus on learning everything you can from those around you. Focus on teaching everything you can to those around you. And for me, when I was coming up through this industry, I had a lot of great folks that I just soaked up knowledge from around me. And at the same time, I started learning myself of doing things differently or doing things the way that meant for me, or releasing research or working with folks and doing things better. And it's my job now to teach that back to everybody else as well. Same thing for you. Thank you. Appreciate it. By the way, if you go to trustedsec.com, I'll post the slides up there so you can see them. All right?
Okay.